Good afternoon. My name is Elizabeth Simons. I'm Baroness Simons, and as that name implies, I'm a member of the House of Lords, and it's my pleasure and honour to be chairing this meeting this afternoon. Can I just, before I introduce our principal guest, who of course we've all come to hear, can I just make a few housekeeping announcements, please? This meeting is on the record. Chatham House rules do not apply to this meeting, so please remember that and bear it in mind. You can comment on Twitter if you use #CHEvents. Can I please ask you to put your phones on silent now? There is one person in this room who sat next to me at lunchtime and knows that mine was not on silent, and it was very embarrassing. So please can I ask all of you if you'll be kind enough to make sure that that is the case. There are Chatham House staff here, and they will be able to help you if anybody has any particular queries. Now, it is Your Excellencies, very good to see so many of the Arab ambassadors here. You're all enormously welcome, as indeed is everybody else. So my lords, ladies, gentlemen, friends and colleagues, it's really a great pleasure to see you all here this afternoon, and a very particular pleasure to welcome our guest speaker, of course known to many of us, many of you in this room, Ahmed Abulgate. He is, of course, Secretary General of the League of Arab States and has been Secretary General since July last year. And in that position, of course, has the extraordinary oversight across what is happening in the Arab world at the moment, and therefore is in a peculiarly good position to address the subject before us, prospects for peace and stability in the Middle East. He is, of course, a very distinguished former Foreign Minister for Egypt. He was so for 7 years, and he's held many, many important roles, not least the Egyptian permanent representative at the UN. He was also, of course, a former ambassador to Italy, and had the very distinguished honour of being awarded the Légion d'honneur in France in 2002. And I always think that anybody who has managed to impress the French in that way must have a really distinguished career.
Especially if he doesn't speak French.
Well, Your Excellency, we are delighted that you speak English, and we're very much looking forward to hearing you address us on the subject of the prospects for peace and stability in the Middle East. Please. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Baroness. It is a pleasure, it is an honor to address this very distinguished gathering. I joined the Egyptian Foreign Service in 1st of June, '65. It took me 52 years to come to Chatham House. So I wonder if that is a failure or what. The subject of peace and stability in the Middle East. It is an extremely difficult subject to speak about. Extremely difficult subject. There are those who would say, well, what is happening in the region nowadays is characterized by such and such and such. That is easy to say. But for them also to say, but we understand the reasoning behind this and this and this, not necessarily right and not necessarily wrong. The Middle East is a very complex region, full of some Westerners in 2011, while I was still foreign minister, came and said, well, this is because of you. What is happening is because of the lack of democracy. Wrong. Others said, lack of political openness. Wrong. lack of economic opportunity. Not necessarily so. It is a very complex society, and one has really to go deeper to try to understand. 40 days ago, I attended the Arab Summit in Dead Sea in Amman. There, I think, some of the answers were brought up in the resolutions and the decisions of the summit. What did we do in the summit as an answer to the problems of the region? Conclusions of some leaders was that the so-called Arab Spring was a farce. It didn't work. Some people, some of the leaders, or at least that the region paid a huge price in the so-called Arab Spring. I do not call it Arab Spring. Sadly, I call it Arab destruction. Though I knew all along for years and years that the region deserves change, and we are entitled in the region for change. But it didn't work. That was one of the conclusions. The second conclusion was that the neighboring states should stop interfering in Arab affairs. It was obvious that we have neighbors that are playing their hands into the region's affairs. Turkey is one, stationing forces northern Iraq, northern Syria. Iran is a second. A third is the Israeli hand in many of the region's affairs. One of the conclusions also was to highlight the importance of a settlement for the Palestinian question. That the Palestinian question, when we keep saying all along for years and years and decades that that is the root cause for everything bad in the region, and nobody believes, no. It has been proven that in the absence of a settlement for the Palestinian problem, we are always subject to difficulties in the region. There has been also one of the conclusions that states and leaders have been reconciling their differences. And that is a very good development. Why is it so? Because for two very important states like Saudi Arabia and Egypt, the leaders met, reconciled their so-called differences, and started anew a very warm relationship. There has been also a very deep discussion on the malaise that the whole region is suffering from and the problems that the region is passing through, and the attempt to settle the problems, and how to plot a course covering all areas of life in order to take the region from one stage of what we are seeing, I do not know how even to characterize it, to a better situation. What are we witnessing today? Today, a part of what the Arab leaders have characterized or stated. We see a country like Iran who is claiming, some officials are claiming, that Iran controls the decisions in 4 Arab capitals. Very sad. That Iran aims at extending its influence from the Iranian borders with Iraq to the Mediterranean. We see, as I said, Turkey in northern Iraq and northern Syria. We see possibly an ideological presence of Turkey in a country like Libya. We see the pawn or the fingers or the hand of Iran in Yemen. We see a Sunni-Shia conflict, or at least the possibility of a conflict between Sunni Arabs and the Shia Arabs. We see terrorism spreading everywhere in the region and even extending to Europe. We see Sunni-Sunni conflicts. So we see lots of problems. We see rivalries between the great powers that disappeared since the disappearance of the Soviet Union in 91, 92, or even 1990. I often characterize the relationship today or the appearance of Russia today as the rivalry with the West and NATO in the 70s and 80s, but today happening in the region, the Middle East. We feel that the national state is almost on the verge of disappearing in many Arab countries. The possibility of drawing new borders, of secessions. And people are talking about let them divide, let them have their own different ethnic states. Something awful, I think. Why is it awful? Because you cannot draw lines of borders. On what basis would you draw lines of borders? As if you are calling for a continuation of conflict spreading for 100 years to come. We detect also a certain, I wouldn't say hatred, but a certain apprehension, deep apprehension with the people vis-à-vis the West in the region. Many states and countries are economically failing. Disappearance of the hateful Sykes-Picot arrangements. Disappearance. To the point that often I say, or I claim myself on TV and in the press, I would hope to have a Sykes-Picot but reversed, done by our own hands, establishing our own national states. And when I speak about national states, I do not describe them. I know what had happened, but I aspire for a national state that is rational, that respects human rights, that gives every citizen of the national states his rights and obligations, and not to be suppressed the way it happened in countries like Iraq under Saddam Hussein, or Hafez al-Assad, or the Ba'ath Party under the Ba'ath Party in Syria. We see the whole region, at least 50% of the population of the region are youth between the age of between 15 and 29. So you have not less than 170 million Arab youth that are below the age of 29. Many of them without jobs. That is a very sad situation. We see cholera back in action in Yemen. We see polio back in certain number of states. We see millions of Syrian children without schools. Between 4 to 5 million Syrians are out of Syria. And between 4 to 5 Syrian nationals living in Syria, but not where they have their homes, displaced. So a very bad thing. This is the characterization. How to handle such a disaster after 2011. I think we have to, and that is to come to peace and security, peace and stability. We have to lay down our priorities well. What is the first priority, in my opinion? Judging from 52 years of experience in diplomacy, the first order of the day, in my opinion, is to defeat terrorism. And terrorism has two aspects: Daesh, ISIS, IC, IS, and the local terrorism that is spreading in different areas. To defeat Daesh, you have to employ local forces, armies, as well as to introduce whoever is ready to contribute to that destruction. He's welcome. And we see different forces on the ground in Syria and in Iraq. That is the first order of the day, in my opinion. To get Mosul back, to defeat Daesh in Raqqa in Syria. Then the second order of the day is to reconcile the differences of such societies, whether in Iraq, Sunni Shia, or Sunni Sunni, or Syria, or Libya. How to build relations amongst the different factions in order to prepare the ground for the rebuilding of the nation state or the national state that is established on new norms and new understandings, new constitutions, the rule of law, human rights, whatever that is applied in the Western world has to be applied in such societies. We have to convince Iran to restrain, as I am restrained because we are on record. Since I am on record, I am really restrained. I am not speaking fully my mind. But we have to keep working on the Iranians to restrain their spreading all over the region the way they think, because it is not proper for a Muslim country to claim that it has the right to protect other Muslims living on other countries. Because in the Arab world, we have Shia and Sunni. So the Iranians, they claim the ultimate right of protection to the Shias anywhere in the world. That is not the proper approach as I see it. So that is the priorities I see. A very tall agenda. We have to work on the mosque, on the religious context of the message of the mosque and of the religion. And we have to focus on education. Education that would produce different citizens and different youth. We have to generate enough energy in societies to allow them economically to persevere and to launch themselves, hoping at finding job opportunities for the youth, as I was saying, 150 million people below the age of 29. A comprehensive economic and social change. All this, in my opinion, I think, will take, if not years, possibly decades. Possibly decades. And that is the difficulty of the region as I see it. Ultimately, the Palestinian question, or lastly, the Palestinian question. The Palestinian question really deserves an intensive effort to find a solution. The president of the Palestinian Authority, Abu Mazen, meets President Trump and tells him only the Palestinian people are still under occupation. And that is a fact of life. In the 21st century, only the Palestinian people, and they are not 100,000 strong. They are possibly 10 million people, 6 of them under occupation. So enough effort, a genuine effort. The sad thing is that I'm not convinced that the Israeli side is really ready or eager to reach a concluding settlement with the Palestinians. And that is the sad thing, because it is for Israel will be living in that region ultimately for life. That is a fact we have to accept. So if the Israelis are wise enough, they have to find a settlement with the Palestinians that would allow the Palestinians a state of their own on the lines of 1967. 67 is in few weeks. Today is 10th of May. On the 5th of June or 10th of June, when the Israelis took hold of the West Bank, it is 50 years of occupation. So it has to come to an end. I claim myself, and I have been claiming all my life, that the Palestinian problem is responsible for lots and lots of everything bad that we are witnessing in this or facing in this region, sadly. So we have to find a settlement for the Palestinian question. The Arab League is ready to play its role. It is offering the international community and the world and the Israelis the Arab Initiative. The Arab Initiative of 2002 or 2002 in Beirut, when they offered land for peace, give the Palestinians their freedom and their state, Arab countries will be ready to reach out for Israel. But the offer has been laying there at the table or on the table for how many years now? 14 years. Thank you very much. Minutes? Did I take 20 minutes or more?
Yes, you were very good on time. Thank you, because we started a little late. Your Excellency, that was a terrific overview, and thank you very much. And particularly thank you for bringing us up to date with what's happened in Amman at the Arab Summit recently. I think that was enormously helpful to have such an up-to-date account from you on that. Can I start off by asking you, that you started with the Palestinian-Israeli question and you ended pretty close to it as well. Do you think that because we are hearing on an almost daily basis about the terrible conflicts in Yemen, in Syria, in Libya, some of them are obviously proxy Sunni Shia, not all of them by any means. Libya, I guess, is slightly different again. But do you think that because there is such awful examples of violence and terrorism in those states, that has distracted the world from the question, the long-standing question of Palestine? We used to have in Palestine at the forefront of our minds every time we talked about the Middle East. I find when I go to the region now, it is not the first question raised. The first question raised are the issues that you raised about Iran and about the conflicts in the three countries I've just mentioned. So do you think that is something that's happened because of those conflicts?
Absolutely. Absolutely, of course. Because up to 2011, we were engaging both parties as Egypt. I was still foreign minister at the time. And we were all the time talking about principles for the settlement, the end game, how to proceed to establish a Palestinian state, how to secure Israel, how to ensure the security of Israel through sets of principles and ideas. We have been talking all along, and the Israelis and the Palestinians have been meeting, and we were making progress. Then comes what came, and everything Palestinian or the Palestinian issue was put on the back burner for 5-6 years. The new American administration and the new American president personally, it is he is talking about it plainly and on TV and on everywhere, that he's ready to reach what he calls the grand deal, or the. So we are all waiting for something to take place. But my fear, as I stated earlier, is that the Israelis, they are not eager. They are not eager. Some Israelis, I heard myself before coming to be Secretary General of the Arab League, they were saying to me personally, as a former foreign minister, let the Arab world explode. We will not act. Why would we act? There is no force to compel us to act. Today, hopefully the international community would recognize the need for a settlement. Hopefully the American new administration would really show determination and perseverance. And the Israelis will have to come under pressure of the international community of the world.
But in that context, do you think that the United Nations still has a role to play? We've talked about the two-state solution now for so long, a two-state solution which allows a state of Palestine to emerge, which is a sustainable state, which has contiguous land mass. I just wonder now whether this is something that the UN has lost sight of because of the concentration that there is.
No. The UN adopted, the Security Council adopted in December 2016. I see a very important resolution then, stating the right of the Palestinians for their own state. Palestinian state, living side by side with Israel, making reference to the illegality of the settlement activity and the establishment of settlements. The UN is very important, and whatever that will be reached between the two sides will have to be brought to the attention of the Security Council to put it in. You see, twice in the history of the conflict, the UN had what we call it support for the establishment of the Palestinian state.
Absolutely.
In 2016 and in 2003. There, they made references to. So let's return to whatever resolutions and we proceed.
Thank you. I'm going to turn, if I may now, Your Excellency, to the audience here. Please, if you would like to ask a question, will you indicate in the usual way? And will you please give your name clearly, as well as the organisation from which you come? There are roving mics, and the mic will come to you. Please speak directly into the microphone. Please ask questions, do not make short speeches, and please obviously address the issues that His Excellency has been addressing. The lady over there had the first hand up, and perhaps she can have the mic first, and then I will work across the room. Thank you.
Thank you, Nicole Pichet from the Parliamentary Human Rights Group. Thank you for that very interesting insight into the difficulties in the region right now. You mentioned as a second priority reconciling differences within communities in the Middle East, and I'd like to know what you think are the roots of the polarization and fracturing of many societies in the Middle East, and what you think states should be doing to protect minorities who can be particularly vulnerable when states are fractured and who have often been the subject of quite appalling treatment in many states.
Thank you, Your Excellency.
Thank you very much for a very, very pertinent question. The problem is the authoritarian state. When you have one-party rule asserting its authority in a society, putting everybody else outside of the frame of politics, then as the authoritarian rule or the authoritarian party turns into a Stalinist model, then you find yourself subject to one-man rule. And as the one-man rule applies his powers, he has also his family around him. And everybody else has to be put aside. That was because you said, why did it happen? In my interpretation is this what had happened, whether in Libya or Syria or Iraq.
Thank you.
How to ensure you have to remodel the state on the rule of law, the right of every citizen for certain, according to certain principles. The rule of law, when you apply the law as it should, there would not be abuses anywhere, and the minorities will be protected.
Thank you. There's a lady, but I think next to a gentleman in green trousers. Thank you very much. And then I'm going to come to the gentleman nearer the front. Thank you.
Müge Ekşi, I'm a member of Chatham House. Two very brief questions. From your perspective, when you look at Turkey, which was seen by some as a role model for the Middle East and now seems to be moving more in the direction that you described as more authoritarian, more about single party, single man rule, what is your perspective on that? And also, what are the implications for the U.S.'s decision to support or deliver arms to YPG, and how does that change the dynamics in the region going forward against ISIS and for the Kurdish population there?
Thank you.
Very difficult questions to answer.
It's Chatham House.
What you are saying on record.
Absolutely. Good answer.
If it wasn't on record, then I would have answered. I tell you, the people would make the choice. In Turkey, people are making choices. People are making choices. We have to accept the choices of people. You see, I understand the concerns of the Turkish state. I, as a diplomat who understands history, I understand the concerns of the Turkish state. But the important thing is for Turkey not to extend itself beyond the interest of Turkey, extending itself to the Ottoman Empire. That is not the proper approach. But for Turkey itself, I understand their concerns. I will not exceed beyond that since I am on record.
A proper diplomatic answer. Gentleman here with spectacles, green tie, thank you very much.
Nicholas McLean, member for over 50 years. Your Excellency, could you comment on...
A member over 50 years?
Of Chatham House.
But you are already 50 years old.
Thank you. Thank you for the traditional Arab courtesy. And I would like to ask you about the refugee crisis. Some Arab states have been remarkably generous in their response, others less so. And of course, this is true of many of the states around the world. But what more can be done to ensure a more united and also more positive approach which will solve the crisis?
The crisis is really severe, very severe. And I think Arab states were all generous. Take a country like Egypt. Egypt itself, because I live in Egypt, I'm Egyptian. We have in Egypt possibly 300,000 Syrians, between 300,000 to 400,000 Syrians. And they do not live in camps. They come, they apply for schooling for their children, for jobs, and the Egyptian states offer them the rights of Egyptian citizens: free education, free medical care. Take a country like Jordan. I visited Jordan. I visited the camps there. And the Jordanians are making a huge effort to host them, to allow them jobs outside of the camps, but they host them in camps. And there, I visited the Za'atari camp a while ago, last year, I think. A camp of 100,000 citizens, Syrians. The camp receives every week, 600 new babies. And they have 2 schools, 2 hospitals inside the camp. And there, I noticed that very tiny, small houses, not tents, and the flags of Saudi Arabia and the flags of Qatar everywhere. Though the supervisor is UNHCR, but the financing is coming from Saudi Arabia and from Qatar. The problem will stay with us for an extended period of time as long as the conflicts are still taking place. And when the conflicts will come to an end, I meet Mogherini a month ago, and she says, "You know, Ahmed, how much will be needed to rebuild Syria anew? How much is it to?" My response was 100 billion, and the figure she gave, $900 billion only for Syria. So refugees would not be eager to return to demolish. In Syria, I often say what I see in Syrian and Iraqi cities as if it is Germany in April 45. German cities destroyed, annihilated completely. That is Syria today. So refugees, why would they return, and for what jobs? They won't. So it will stay with us for a while, and the international community is obliged to sustain them all along. This is not only the problem, the Arab refugee. We have across Libya a disaster in play because Africans are coming through Libya because the state is on the verge of disintegration, no authority to have borders or to stop people from coming, or at least to organize the passage of people. And they cross the Mediterranean and they die, they drown. So a very sad story. And sadly, they have been encouraged to rebel. And then people thought that it will last only for 6 weeks, 6 months. It lasted for 6 years up till now. when they were compelled to leave their homes, borders were closed. Sadly, very few opened their borders.
The Palestinian ambassador in front, if you could have the microphone, please. And then I'm going
The
to
Palestinian ambassador, why didn't you say so?
She knows me better.
And then I'll turn to this side of the room. Gentleman with the white hair next, please. And third row back.
Did you read my books
Yes.
on Palestine?
Yes. Your Excellency, I cannot but commend your incisive and analytic exposition of the Middle East, the way you have put it so in a subtle way that makes a lot of sense. And I think you personally, you come from the school of rationalism and pragmatism, where you make things more practical in terms of finding solutions. You were rightly so, and I totally agree with you when you emphasized that the Arab Spring and whatever you want to call it is a transient phenomenon. The essence of instability and insecurity in the Middle East has always been the non-resolution of the Palestinian problem, and you were rightly so in your analysis. However, against this background, you know, we have seen that this right-wing government in Israel, it is a coalition of settlers government, you know, are not keen to make any deals with the Palestinians. And as a matter of fact, they're buying time in creating new facts on the ground through creeping annexation and building settlements. Let alone that, you know, many previous administrations in the United States have failed dismally in their brokerage of any deal with the Palestinians and the Israelis. And, you know, and if we look today on the ground and we see, as Baroness Simons has explained to us, that it is impossible with the non-geographic contiguity that we have in the West Bank, with 3 major clusters of settlements, with East Jerusalem being sealed by the E1 envelope, with Gaza completely not connected to the West Bank. And still we're talking about a two-state solution, because this is the international community that shouldered its responsibility to deliver the goods of a two-state solution. But if you go, Your Excellency, and you know for a fact, if things continue like this, I think the two-state solution is dead. We have to look into other solutions. However, my question to you against all this background, do you think still that the Americans, after 23 years, and today UK, which is very, very busy with its Brexit, and with the EU that is totally being disenfranchised, with the Arab world that is totally decimated, you know, fractionalized, and with a president that says something and the next day he says something else. You know, to what extent are we hopeful that there will be a clinch deal to this peace process that we have been aspiring for so many years now? Believing that, you know, the chief executive of the United States does not have more than 20% of the decision-making process. Where does Congress stand? Where are the pressure groups, the lobbyists, the interest groups, AIPAC? Where are those, I mean, in the context of a deal that Mr. Trump is going, you know, to achieve for us in the near future?
Thank you.
I'm told that at 6 there would be another session, so we have only 5 minutes.
Maybe we can do to 10, but if you, I know, have got many commitments this evening, so we started a little bit late, so we can do for 10 more minutes, Your Excellency.
Okay.
Great.
Thank you, Ambassador, for the question. I have to tell you, at 5:30 this morning in Cairo, I was reading an article written in Foreign Policy. And I noticed really an amazing conclusion. The writer said that never in Netanyahu's wildest dreams that he would be chairing a government, all of its members are to his right. Meaning it proves your point. That is one. A lot will depend on what pressure will be applied to change the mindset of Israel. What offers would trigger incentives for them, and what price the Palestinians and the Americans will have to pay them. The American president is showing eagerness, enthusiasm. I have to believe him. I have to believe him. We have to maintain hope, because if we do not have hope, then, okay, close doors, and maybe in 200 years, it will, the dynamics will change. But that should not be because the result of the anger, the disappointment, the failure of finding a settlement led Palestinian youth to do things that no human being would believe that someone would enter or step inside a bus and explode himself. So that is unnatural. So the Israelis themselves have to be convinced that it is for their sake and for the sake of the Palestinians and then for the sake of the whole region that peace has to be established. It's an extremely complex situation. And as long as it continues like this, it will worsen. And then you will have the possibility of one state with one people. And please allow the Palestinian to go to the balloting box and to bring his own prime minister. Because if you take the Palestinian population in the West Bank and Gaza, as well as the Palestinian Israeli citizens inside Israel, they equal in numbers the current Israeli population. So in 10 years, in 20 years, you know Haniyeh, who has been elected the chairman of Hamas, he has 12 children. 12 children. A story has been recounted to me so many times by a great former Egyptian diplomat, late Osama al-Baz. He keeps saying he met a Palestinian woman in Gaza years ago in 1970. And she said, guess what? How would we defeat the Israelis? And he said, how? She said, this. I will produce. And mind you, they are all 100% well-educated. 100%. In 1968, an article in Foreign Affairs saying that Palestinians had, at the time, 80,000 university graduates. 80,000 university, American and British and French universities, because they didn't have universities inside their own country. So the Palestinian is energetic, active, and he will keep pressing for his rights.
Thank you. Can we have the microphone to the gentleman in the third row back? I'm going to ask you to keep the questions short.
I recognize, sorry, Baroness, I recognize Jeremy Greenstock, a great British ambassador.
Oh my goodness, there he is. How very nice to see you, Jeremy. Welcome.
My colleague in New York.
Well, I'm delighted that he's here. I'd also like then to go next to the gentleman at the back who's been very patient, wearing spectacles, right at the very back of the room next, please. So,
Anthony Newton, member of Chatham House. Thank you for an excellent talk. Given that the Palestinian-Israeli conflict is such a major contributory factor in the situation you're talking about, let's assume it's settled, it's resolved. What then are the prospects for peace and stability in the Middle East? Thank you.
A very good question, too. Very good question. You will have to take it into the context, a frame of reform. So the Palestinian question is settled, but the reforming of the Middle East has to continue and to continue. We have to keep working.
Gentleman at the back with the spectacles. Thank you.
Irfan Aziz, a member of Chatham House. I have a couple of questions. First, you mentioned about the Iran's control around 4 countries in Arab countries. So my question is, what is the Arab world's plans to stop Iran to not do any more? The second question is about north of Iraq, which is called Kurdistan Regional Government. They trying to hold in referendum independent for Kurdistan. What's your opinion about that? Thank you.
Thank you very much. The Iran spreading across the Arab world has to come to an end as a brotherly advice. But also, they have to be resisted. Arab states have to resist the spread of Iranian influence. If you have the so-called Arab countries working together, as I hope, and to employ the Arab League as I hope, then at least the message will reach our Iranian brothers, and we call them brothers because they are Muslims. Please stop interfering in our internal affairs. That is one. Kurdistan. My hope is that whatever referendum is applied, the new Arab model today for the national state does not preclude the possibility of a federated state, federal state. So the federal state is available, whether in Syria or in Iraq or anywhere in the Arab world, as decided by the population itself, by the people. So have your referendum, but stay within the federal state.
I'm going to take 3 short questions altogether, and please keep them really short. One there, third row back, there was then somebody who caught my eye. Yes, the gentleman there, third row back on this side, and then the gentleman who you're just passing with his hand in the air further back as well. So those 3 questions, I ask you please, keep them short. We're going to take this gentleman first, and then you.
Ghaith Armanazi, formerly an Arab League ambassador to London. We heard a very eloquent exposure of all that's wrong and all the ills and the tragedies that befall the Middle East today. What is the role of the Arab League in terms of addressing some of these problems and tragedies? Is it still relevant in today's world? Because we see it absent from many of the moves and diplomatic initiatives that are taking shape about Syria, about other countries as well. Perhaps you could say a few words about that. Thank
Lovely.
you.
We'll keep that one in mind, the role of the Arab League in solving these problems. Gentleman here.
Yeah, thank you very much, Your Excellency. You have explained the dimensions of the Palestinian...
Can you give us your name? Sorry.
I am the media attaché at the Embassy of the Sudan.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. You have explained, Your Excellency, the dimensions of the Palestinian problem very well and very deeply. But in your priorities, it did not come number 1 to address. How come? Because you said facing terrorism is the first priority. Don't you think that terrorism is motivated to a great deal by anger because of what's happening to the Palestinians?
Thank you. So is it really terrorism, or is it actually the root cause is the Palestinian question? Gentleman there, thank you.
David Abraham, Rusi. Enjoyed your presentation a lot, but one thing you never mentioned was your friends here in Britain. Britain's always been very influential in the Middle East. Do you think we're doing enough at present, and what more would you like Britain to do?
Admirably brief, all three questions. So that's the role of the Arab League in trying to settle the questions. What about Palestine? Isn't it really the root cause of the terrorism? And therefore, that's the first priority. And the last one, what about Britain? Does Britain do enough?
Very short answers. Very short answers. Because of the lack of the strains of time. The Arab League, yes, I understand your point. It has been marginalized. It has been marginalized and intentionally marginalized in many of such issues. Why is it so? Because the conflicts were so complex to the point that member states of the Arab League themselves were in the midst of the whole thing. So it is better not to apply or to side with this side against that side. So it is better to stay away till. But the Arab League is not only political. The Arab League is economic, and you have been ambassador of the Arab League. It is economic, it is social, it is legal, it is lots and lots and lots of disciplines. So that is an answer to your question. The Palestinian question in relation to terrorism, I fully understand your point. I agree with it. I'm sorry. I should have applied first the Palestinian, but the analysis took me to explain and then to end by the Palestinian. But the Palestinian is, of course, paramount in our thinking. Britain, please do not celebrate the Balfour Declaration. Because, yes, the Balfour Declaration triggered so much in the region. So why would you add insult to injury? This is my answer.
Thank you so much.